Okay, well, if you keep it quiet everywhere else, everybody else mute, and we'll start off with the show. Thank you very much for everybody coming to join us. I can see people beginning to enter the room now, up to 24 participants. We thought when we started the lockdown that we wanted to do something in terms of raising money to support people that are suffering most from the COVID-19 crisis. We also thought, to be frank, we were missing football. We know that Jurgen Klopp has probably had the best words on this matter, saying to the journalists very clearly that some things are more important than football. Some things are even more important than Liverpool winning the Premier League for the first time in many years. But nevertheless, I think that I'm probably talking to a group of people that are as fanatical as me about football. So tonight, despite the fact that we've had the terrible news tonight that the deaths in this country are up to 28,000, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting football is more important than that. But I do tonight want us to focus on what's the football perspective on the COVID-19 perspective? What does it mean for football? How is the face of football changing? And have a conversation about what we can do as football fans to help. For the show tonight, we have in North London our technical team, our producers, Noah Jaffe and Kevin Sheridan, who you can see waving and giving his thumbs up on the screen. We have football writers and award-winning football writers, Anthony Clavane, give us a wave, Anthony, and Carrie Dunn, all the way from London, giving us a wave there. We've also got, perhaps a bit unusually for a football show, not one, but two poets. We've got Mike Harwood and we've got Anthony Roberts. But Anthony Roberts seems to have disappeared for the moment, but I'm sure he will reappear when he masters the... here he is, he's back. So, and
yes, I'm here.
Good. Welcome, Anthony. So we're all here, and I'm the presenter for tonight. I'm Bryn Griffiths. You might have heard me occasionally on the local community radio station, Colne Radio, and I tweet as incessantly as Call You Bryn on Twitter. Just get a feel for who's out there. Kevin, would it be possible to put our first poll up to find where people are watching from? So a poll's going to come up on the screen. Sounds a bit complicated. How are you going to vote? It's simply click on the option that you want to choose. So are you from the Eastern region, the region of the Colchester United and the Tractor Boys? Are you from London, from the mighty Dulwich Hamlet and Clapton? Are you from the North, where teams like Leeds and FC United of Manchester exist? Somewhere else in England? Or maybe, it's just possible, are you from somewhere in the rest of the world? So if everybody clicks, and then if you're ready, Kevin, could you give us the results to find out where our watchers are watching us from?
They're still voting at the moment.
Still voting. So you just click on the option. And the categories are a bit large, I know. Eastern region, London, the North, the rest of England, and the rest of the world. So which is it going to be? So I think the Eastern region has it with 69%. We've got one person in from London, two from Leeds, and elsewhere in England we've got one, and Barcelona and the rest of the world at this point of the proceedings totally unrepresented, and quite a few people that didn't master the voting. So the next part of the evening is our first poem of the evening. And we're lucky to have Mr. Anthony Roberts, who some of you in Colchester will have noticed is regularly, daily, putting up a poem. Pardon? Daily putting up a poem to keep up our spirits during the COVID-19 crisis. People in Colchester will not only be missing their football, they'll be missing their cultural activities, their outings to the arts centre. I'm sure.
You're damn right they will.
And so I'll hand over to the one and only, the cultural colossus of Colchester, Mr. Anthony Roberts.
Go! What an introduction. Thank you. I've been asked to choose a poem, and so I chose this poem when Bryn asked me. Thank you for asking me. I must say already this programme's been a complete delightful journey Where it's going, I don't know, but it's been delightful, every bit of it so far. I chose a poem by a poet called Brian Bilston, who appears a lot on Twitter. And having chosen this poem, I've regretted it ever since, because it's been one of the most difficult poems to read. I've been trying this all afternoon. I haven't got it right once. So fasten your seatbelts. This poem is actually about happier days. It's a reminiscence of that time a couple of summers ago when we actually thought that football might, just for a few brief weeks, we actually believed that football might be coming home. And so this is about that little World Cup journey, and it's to the tune of Subterranean Homesick Blues by Bob Dylan, and it's called World Cup Homesick Blues, and this is how it goes. I'm wishing myself good luck here. Please enjoy this verse. Harry's gone for placement, dishing out the medicine. Nations in the basement, despairing at the government. The man in the waistcoat looks out, jumps up, shoulders feeling pretty rough, readjusts his shirt cuffs. You're out, kids, but look what you did. God knows when you'll be doing it again. Approach it in the right way, making lots of new friends. Man in an England cap in the wig and pen goes and turns the sound down. That's enough, thanks, Glenn. Stones rocks, shirt red, Maguire leaps, big head, Trippier in the heat, puts the balls in the box, but think about how you play. Don't give the ball away. The people in the pub say, Raheem will score one day. You're out, kids, but look what you did. Walk on your tiptoes, tuck out your elbows, watch out for the long throws, dictate how the game goes, keep the door closed, confident grows. It hopes to have a better game to know which way the kicks go. Oh, Delhi sig, Delhi well, group stages farewell, steam squad, country gel, 3 lions, heart swell, work hard, Lingard, get back now, Kyle, dig in, use guile, work out your own style, look out, kids, you're going to get hit by foulers, cheaters, penalty spot abusers, turn up the heaters, Pickford leaping and sticking out his left hand, build a team of leaders. Who was marking Mina? Ah, get through, keep on, advance, romance, fortnight dance, IKEA, no fear, football gets near, free kick, freak out, hearts lift, chance come, chance missed, it's gripping, it's brooding, but they won't marking, man, Dukic. You're out, kids, but look what you did. Don't hide down a manhole, think of all you've handled, avoiding all the scandals, leading by example. Now you've seen what you've begun, it's time to move on, hard work, teamwork, relighting the candle.
Is he all right? Anthony, that was a triumph. I was watching Mr. Harwood, the Colne radio poet in residence during that, and I could see the look of apprehension on his face that you have raised the bar that he's got to try and reach in the second half of the evening. A tremendous performance, Anthony.
Thank you. Great poem.
It's a sort of Bob Dylan meets rapping, I think.
Kind of is, really, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, dear, I've been trying that all afternoon. So, it's a great poem. And it was a great few weeks, wasn't it? And it was. Captured some of the things it reminded me of when we were looking back. No one thought at that time, God knows we never thought when we were watching those football matches that the situation we'd be in now, would we? You know?
No, we certainly didn't. It's... as I say, it's unprecedented. The biggest delay I've ever seen in football matches when they've played is at Leyton Orient at the end of the season a year or so ago with Colchester United, when the Orient fans invaded the pitch and protest against their owner, and we had to wait 1.5 hours for the match to kick off. But what we're experiencing now, I think, dwarfs that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Anthony, a triumph.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the show now. So jolly good. Well done. And
if you enjoyed, Anthony, if you go to the Colchester Arts Centre Twitter feed or the Colchester Arts Centre, I think it might be on Instagram, and I'm sure it's on Facebook as well, you can have the delights of an Anthony Roberts poem every day of the week. They're not always quite football related, but they're pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So what I'd like to turn to now is our charity partner for this evening. And I think it's incredibly important that when the COVID crisis occurred, that we don't just think about ourselves and what we're going through with our lock-ins and how we're missing our families and missing our football. I think it's also important that we think about other people. And I'm going to speak to Tom Tayler in a moment. And he worked for Colchester United Football in the community. And I think those of us that are Colchester United fans can be really proud about the work that the club's doing and its football in the community arm. So if you could switch your mic on, Tom, I'd like to start off by asking you to tell us what Colchester United Football in the community is, because those outside Colchester might not know what it's all about.
Yeah, of course. Good evening, everyone. So Colchester United Football in the community, we're the charitable arm of the football club. We're based out of Clavane Community Sports Centre, which is just across town from the new stadium and probably about, stone's throw from the back of where Lair Road is. In normal times, we would be engaging the community using the power of sport and the brand of the football club, whether that be through activities in schools, working with community groups. We've got participants as young as 2 and as old as 92. And we've got quite a lot of different strands of work that we do. So whether that be education, sports participation, or health and inclusion, quite a mixed bag, really. So
what's the Colchester United Football in the community doing now because of the COVID crisis? Because you've shut up shop as far as it is of teaching the children and the people of Colchester their football lessons. So what are you doing now? I've heard about it and it's a good story.
Yeah, so we've obviously we're not delivering anything like what we normally would. Unfortunately, we've got a small number of staff left and a small pool of volunteers that we've been able to recruit over the last few weeks, and we're now providing outreach into the community at a time where they probably need it most. That's in terms of man hours, that's in terms of vehicles that we've got left between us working, and also a lot of coordination for this small group of people. I think it was really key that right at the start, the chairman came out and said he wants Colchester United to be part of the solution, and we feel that this is part of it. And trying to supplement all the other work, there's some fantastic groups, some fantastic work going on across
Colchester. Do you want to tell us about those groups, Tom, that you're supporting, the Foodbank and the other groups that you're working so closely with?
Yeah, so a lot of our work at the minute is supporting those other groups that are working, local charities. So we're doing quite a lot of work with the Foodbank. We're teamed up with them to go and collect some of their donations from supermarkets. I think I saw a stat that their demand had gone up by about 300%. So, and they've got lots of staff that can't work because they're self-isolating. So we've been able to kind of fill that gap for them. We've been working with some smaller charities. So there's Munch Clubs in Greenstead, and then there's GO4 Café. They put together these food parcels for kind of local residents, and us and our volunteers have been able to deliver that for them. We've worked with Barnardos as well, slightly differently with them. They support vulnerable families, and we've been able to use our transport and our staff to be able to really support them. So an example of that for everyone will be that there was a family that had recently moved to the area that didn't have any beds or anywhere to sleep. So we were able to support that, and once they located a bed, we could kind of transport that for them and make sure we could get that to them. So all very different, but all very important things to try and help people out in these difficult times.
And so if we get some donations in tonight, what will the money be spent on?
A few different things, really. Well, it means we can upscale what we're doing at the moment. We can reach further across Colchester, but also it might mean that we can expand into other communities surrounding Colchester as well. We can put more resource to it, whether that be man hours. A lot of coordination goes into it, so we can obviously do a lot more work around that. We're also looking to try and add in some new streams of our outreach work. So we're looking at the moment at how we can support younger people that might be going through tough times. There's a lot of support for everyone, but there might be a slight gap for that. Young people that maybe kind of up to the age of 18 that we can support. And we also committed right at the start of this that we want to help people now. Of course we do, but it's really important that when we get back to some sort of normality, when this comes to an end, we want to help people reintegrate into society as well. So that's going to be a really important part of what some of this money's spent on.
So if people want to donate tonight, if you go to the chat, which is in the middle of the bottom of your screen, and click on that, you'll find a link to the Colchester United Just Giving page for the coronavirus campaign. And if you click on that, it'll take you straight through to the Just Giving page. And I really ask you, we haven't charged for tonight's event, but if you could put a few quid in that donation box, it would be hugely appreciated, and allow Tom and his excellent team to do even better work to support Colchester's community through this terrible crisis. Tom, I know that the football in the community is the part of the club that you're involved in, but I feel I must ask you if you could set out what has happened with the club having to lay off a number of players and a number of players from the academy over the last week, and where Robbie Cowling is on this question at the moment.
Yeah, I can of course give you my opinion on it. I think one thing that I would say that was really obvious from Robbie's initial statement is how transparent he wanted to be about the whole situation. Really had kind of the players' best interests at heart, with especially the initial 4 that we released. It was to give them the best chance in what's a really difficult environment at the moment. As well as that, I think he spoke really highly of those four players, and was almost touting them out to other clubs and say, look, there's no hard feelings at all. And I think as well, it really cleared the football club, if situations do change, or they can revise maybe what they've looked at and have a look at how they might change it. But I think you've seen or you'll start seeing certainly other clubs doing things very similar in the coming weeks. I think it was an announcement about our players at a similar time anyway that it normally would be after when the last home game of the season is. It's just probably we were one of the first ones to release something like that. But I mean, you saw Cambridge United do something quite similar just after that, which is, it's kind of the state of what it is now.
So we've had quite a sympathetic response, I think, in Colchester. I just thought it'd be interesting to take a feel of the waters today, and just do a quick poll of the people that are watching tonight. And could you put up the poll on what we think of Robbie Cowling's position, where he's had to lay off some of the players and some of the academy boys, Kevin, so we can see what people's views are on that. So do you think Robbie Cowling's decision to lay off players was understandable because he had no choice in the circumstances, or is it wrong and he shouldn't have done it? Could you vote, please? So you just literally just place your cursor over the circle next to the answer which you think represents your views, and within a moment our production team in North London will be able to tell us what the result is. Are you ready yet, Kevin? Just waiting for it to come through.
Does anybody else want to vote?
Anybody else want to vote on this? I imagine some people from outside Colchester might feel that they can't comment, but any more votes? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 67% thought that he effectively didn't have any choice, and I think that's probably right, isn't it? I don't think that he had any choice. I think it's a very difficult position that he's found himself in. But I think the more interesting question is what should football be doing about it? So we've got a second question that says, do you think, if you could put it up on the screen, Kev, do you think the Premier League's TV money should be top sliced to provide enough funds throughout the whole of football to support that? But we want to support. Do you want to support the whole pyramid, or do you think the Premier League needs to hang on to its money so it keeps competitive in the Champions League? So it's a simple yes/no this time. Should the Manchester Uniteds and the Tottenham Hotspurs and the Liverpools have some of their TV money top sliced to help pay to support the pyramid so we don't face these terrible redundancies? How are we doing, Kevin? Has everybody nearly voted? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see the result. How are we doing, Kev? Yes. So Robbie Cowling's been put in a terrible position where he's got no choice, but it's pretty unanimous amongst the listeners today that he shouldn't have had no choice. He should have been in a position where he could have decided to keep the players, because he should have got a contribution from the richest teams in British football. So thank you for our guest, Tom, from Colchester United. Is there anything you want to add on the crisis, Tom? What did you think of those responses? I think that's fairly typical of what we've been seeing on social media. I've been surprised at how supportive people have been.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think we mentioned it the other day. I think it has been people have seen it as that hard decision. I think it's almost a decision where there's not too much choice, or the football club haven't. And like I said earlier, I think that there'll be lots of football clubs that are going to be forced into similar decisions like that. I think everyone wants football to be back again soon, and obviously to get back to some sort of normality. But at the minute, it will come when it's a safe time to do so, and be guided by everyone else on that. But yeah, that's kind of what I end up with.
Thanks, Tom. Let's move on to looking at the wider picture that we're seeing across the country in football now, and discuss that with Anthony and Carrie. Would Carrie like to kick us off by sort of sketching out what she thinks the state of play is with the different competitions? Where are we at now with the football competitions, the Football League, the Premiership, and across the women's game indeed as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to assess at the moment, really. Obviously, they're still having meetings about how things are going to progress. I mean, I think probably the most interesting thing from my perspective at the moment is that some of the lower tier clubs in the women's game are actually launching some kind of not legal action yet, but they are certainly very disgruntled about the way that the season has been terminated. So I think it's the same in the men's amateur tiers, but below the third tier of the women's football, the season just been closed down. And that's one thing, but the objection seems to be that what's happened is the whole season's been declared null and void. So any goal scored, any goals conceded, any results, they never happened, and that is kind of the big talking point in the women's game at the moment. So yeah, I mean, everything's up in flux, isn't it? It's such a challenging time to be in the world, and as you said at the start, Bryn, I guess we're all going to be kind of putting this caveat in all the way along. Football isn't the most important thing, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what decisions are actually going to be made about the way that football goes on from here, but also how football progresses in the future, because I don't think we're going to not be going back to the way things were before. This is going to be a new normal we'll be facing now. Yeah.
And so, Anthony, moving to your team, you've got a Football League team in the Championship, Leeds United. Will your beloved Bielsa be sat on its bucket again this year, do you think?
No, I don't think he will, Bryn. I think that as far as all the leagues below the Premier League are concerned, I think that's the end of the season in terms of any football being played, whether it's behind closed doors. I don't think that's going to happen. If there is going to be a resumption of the season, it will only be in the Premier League. And that, as far as I hear anyway, is the story. I mean, whether it even resumes in the Premier League as well isn't certain. But the hope from the football authorities is that it will. And the reason it will is they think it will is because the government is kind of trying to push this idea that we need to get sport played again, and for the sort of morale of the nation. And so, therefore, if everything was to continue as it has been for the last month, i.e., no sport at all for the next few months, they fear there'll be this sort of lack of morale, and they know that the value that football particularly has. So they want to get the Premier League back, but it certainly won't be happening in the Championship or League 1 or 2. Anyway, that's my from what I hear anyway. That's. I think the most optimistic is the Premier League will resume maybe in June, but certainly not any of the other leagues.
So you don't think the option that's been canvassed of at least the promotion places and relegation places been played out in empty grounds and streamed by something like iFollow or placed on Quest TV is an option?
No, that's not going to happen. But what is going to happen, and again, the best case scenario, because as far as I'm concerned, I mean, obviously I would like, if the conditions dictate, I would like football to get back, but we mustn't put anyone at risk, players, fans, staff. Obviously, that mustn't happen. But if it was to happen and the Premier League did resume, there would be 3 clubs relegated from the Premier League, which means that 3 clubs would go automatically up from the Championship. So therefore, and I'm afraid I'm being a bit sort of self-interested here, it would mean that Leeds United would go up along with West Brom and Fulham because of a sort of kind of Duckworth-Lewis method, which I think they're going to try and apply with data to see how many points these teams would have got. So there won't be any playoffs. That's what I'm hearing anyway.
Yeah, I think I'm beginning to think that's the view that is beginning to prevail. Carrie, do you think there's any hope that we might see the lower leagues and the Football League playing out this year?
I did think there might be a couple of weeks ago, but it does seem that, again, I seem to have heard the same things that Anthony's heard. The plan seems to be get the Premier League up and running, possibly in neutral venues, probably behind closed doors at the end of June, have kind of 4 weeks in which all the Premier League matches are played in that 4 week space of time, and then August to be given over to finish off the European competitions. And bearing in mind the number of people that would be involved in getting all the other leagues up and running in terms of kind of not just players and coaches, but also kind of stadium staff and backroom team, all that kind of thing. The sheer numbers of possible people that would come into contact with each other, I mean, social distancing would just be kind of out the window. So I think it's going to be a very tight lockdown on Premier League matches, as I say, probably in neutral venues. Possibly, I mean, I know the idea at first was for squads to be basically all in kind of one hotel, just to kind of get that lockdown angle of it. But then I was kind of thinking, well, how's that going to work? Because the hotel staff are surely going to be coming in and out. Are the hotel staff going to be locked down as well? So, Premier League had their big conference call yesterday. Nothing has come from that yet, but presumably they're running out all these details. But yes, I think that's right. It'll be Premier League only.
I do wonder whether, if we're such a huge amount of money at stake, are any of the clubs, maybe clubs like yours, Anthony, likely to get a little bit litigious if they think they've been robbed of the opportunity to enter the land of splendour and opportunity that the Premier League represents for them?
Yeah, I think that will happen, and I think that's one of the reasons why clubs like mine, as in Leeds United, are going to be promoted to the Premier League. Again, it's what I hear, and whether that's fair or unfair, is a good argument, a good conversation to have. And they have, as far as I'm aware, that those kind of litigious noises, I think, have been made behind the scenes, and therefore the Premier League and the football authorities are therefore going to look very seriously at Leeds, West Brom and Fulham, the top 3 in the Championship, just going up without kicking another ball. And although that might seem like great news, I mean, it is great news in one way. Again, I'm sorry to those who aren't Leeds fans, but we've waited 16 years to get back to the promised land. But to get back without the last 9 games of the season, the thrills, the spills, knowing Leeds as well, the fact that we always mess it up, that kind of excitement and then celebration is going to be taken away from us, and it will be a bit flat just to go up now. It'll be an anticlimax, but I think you're right. I think there has been a sort of fear that the likes of Leeds will start to get a bit litigious. It would be the same if Liverpool were denied the title. Let's say they null and voided the Premier League. I mean, Liverpool similarly would, and I think quite rightly, think about litigation because
been very sort of, I think, very proper about it in saying that it's not about Liverpool winning the Premier League. It's about the health of the people of this country. I think his contributions, especially the one at the outset when he was asked the question about coronavirus by one of the journalists, he said, "What are you asking me for? I'm a football manager. Ask an expert that knows about epidemiology." Do you think that might change, though, if Liverpool are robbed of their crown?
No, because I think he's a good man. He's very decent. He's got a lot of integrity, and quite rightly, unlike a predecessor famously said, football's not more important than life and death. Bill Shankly. But I think Klopp's a good man, and he's very decent and full of integrity. I'm not sure if the owners of Liverpool can all be described in that way, because I think they misjudged the mood over the virus. They were going to place all non-playing staff on furlough, and yet they made, I think, was it £42 million profit last year, and that means that they were originally going to take up the government's offer of only paying 80% of those wages, and a club as super rich as Liverpool, we'll come on to this a bit later, but they are one of the big six. They are part of the mega rich, despite Klopp being a wonderful human being, which he is, and the fans being amazing and astonishing, and this great spirit of Liverpool, the sort of spirit of solidarity and communality. I think the owners of Liverpool didn't do themselves any favours, and they had to climb down actually on that, because they did a U-turn. But the fact that they were thinking of placing non-playing staff on furlough, that was an appalling thing. I mean, they weren't the only ones. 3 other top clubs are also doing that. So I think that's the kind of issue really to look at this stage. I think I'm pretty sure that the Premier League will return in some form at some point in June. I don't know, as Carrie was saying, it'll obviously be behind closed doors and so on. But I think more importantly is what's going on now, and this idea that these top clubs who've made billions out of the game over the years are not able to put any money back to help the likes of Colchester United. Is an important, and Barnet. Barnet have had to lay off all their non-playing staff as well. Well, not as well. That's at Cambridge. And so what we're seeing is the inequality of football, which has been growing and growing and growing, really being highlighted by the global pandemic.
Should we just have I think the panel and myself are pretty doom and gloom when it comes to whether the season's going to be played out. But should we just put up the poll to see whether people would favour live matches being played out behind closed doors and streamed on the web to finish the season, Kevin? Could we just put that poll up? I noticed that I've seen it flying across the screen. There was a note from a Tottenham fan saying that the season shouldn't be played out. So let's vote. Would you be in favour of live matches behind closed doors, streamed on the web or on TV to finish the season? Do you think, no, it wouldn't be right, or yes, it would be fair, and I want to see some live football? So if you could vote and say which you think it should be.
Bryn, we're live on Facebook as well.
So I'm glad to see that. If anybody's joined us on the Colchester United Facebook site, very welcome. I'm afraid you can't vote if you haven't come in by Zoom, but we're just seeing what people's views are. The panel's been very gloomy about whether we're going to get any more football this season, but we're now just voting on whether we think it would be right or not. Well, yeah, I'm with the 69% myself, that yes, it would be fair, and I would like to see some live football before the end of the season. I quite fancy, if I'm going to be locked down for much longer, been able to sort of sit in front of Quest TV and see the odd match. But I'm afraid I'm also despondent and pessimistic, like Carrie and Anthony. Moving on to another aspect of this COVID-19 and football, Carrie. What have you thought of the role that Premier League players have played? And at one point, the way that they were scapegoated in the press.
Yeah, I actually think the Premier League players have come out with a hell of a lot of credit. I mean, as you say, they were scapegoated and being told to take pay cuts and all kinds of things. And the point was made that if players are receiving their full wages, they contribute more in tax than the suggested cuts would have contributed. But the fact that the captains got together and set up the Players Together initiative has been excellent, I think. There's lots of kind of fundraising going on in clubs. If you follow kind of social media, you'll see the Clap for the Carers thing being adopted pretty much uniformly. But I was also very interested to see Sergio Aguero's comments yesterday. And he said that he didn't want to go back to playing anytime soon. He said that the players were not entirely happy about it. They were worried about the risk of infection. He was pointing out the fact, they've got families as well. They're not just individuals who come out on a Saturday afternoon to entertain us for 90 minutes. There's all sorts of other risks there. And I'm actually kind of more impressed by that in some ways than I am with anything else that any Premier League player has done during this pandemic, because I think it takes quite a lot for a Premier League player to actually go on the record and firstly express an opinion, and secondly to express something that has got so much backlash. And he must have known that he would have got that kind of backlash when he said it. So apart from the stuff about your City, you don't want Liverpool to win the title, but there's been accusations of cowardice, not a real man, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually pretty impressed with the fact that he actually took that platform and said something that honest.
Yeah, I think that I've been quite impressed by the way football's responded. I don't know if Tom could just put up his mic, because I wonder whether you got any inspiration from the fans on Merseyside, because I know that Liverpool United have been doing some fantastic work with the food banks, haven't they? Have you read about that, Tom? I wondered whether it inspired you in Colchester at all.
Not specifically seen around that initiative, but that was something that the EFL Trust, which is kind of the network that governs us, is really good at, and also the Premier League is putting clubs together to share good practice and share ideas. So we're certainly looking at what other clubs are doing in different parts of the country, and if it's something that is appropriate to kind of the communities that we're in, absolutely, we'd look to do that. But I haven't seen that specific initiative that you're talking about. No, unfortunately, I'll certainly have a look.
I understand Robbie's allowing the NHS to make use of the stadium whilst it's closed.
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, the NHS have been up there, and I think from what I've spoken to a few guys at the stadium, they really enjoyed being there. They've enjoyed the facility. It's given them a sense of normality again, obviously away from how hectic it can be in the hospitals at the minute, obviously. But no, I think that's just another thing the football club can do. That venue there is fantastic at the stadium, and if someone else can benefit from it at a time where obviously not many people can, then I think that's brilliant. And
it was great news that Robbie's decided to extend the cheap season tickets and cheap tickets to beyond the people in the services to the people in the caring sector and the health service, I understand, next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's launched that as well as another initiative, which again is fantastic. Obviously, we've got a big hospital in Colchester. There's one around the corner. You've obviously got the general hospital, as well as all the other people that will benefit from that. So I think it's a really nice gesture, and obviously it's great for us as a football club as well to hopefully attract some more people.
So I paint this picture of Colchester, despite having to lay off of its players, Colchester United playing a pretty good role. Carrie, how on earth can a Premier League football club furlough its low-paid staff off when there's so much cash in the Premier League? It's unimaginable. How could this be?
I've really no idea. And obviously other people share my view, because obviously these U-turns have happened with several of the clubs now. You mentioned about non-playing staff being furloughed, but Reading said this week that they're furloughing their playing staff on the women's side as well as their academy players. So yes, it just seems ridiculous that there is so much money swirling about, and yet clubs are taking advantage of the furloughing scheme. But then I guess that's how rich clubs get rich, don't they? There are these ways to keep your money, and
it's a sad state of affairs, isn't it? It's like a microcosm of everything that's wrong with football, that the desperation to finish the Premier League season just doesn't seem to be reflected in the lower league. It's the elite all over again, I think. Anthony, do you want to come in? Because I know in your book you were quite hot on the neoliberal impact of neoliberal economics on impact on football.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the last book I wrote, which was called Yorkshire Tragedy: Moving the Goalpost, and is available in all good bookshops except the bookshops aren't open at the moment. Is the conclusion that I had was that that because of unregulated hyper-capitalism, there's a sort of growing financial disparity between the sort of mega-rich, the big six really, and the rest of football. And I think that that's just been reinforced by the way that they've responded to this crisis. But Carrie said earlier something interesting, and everything she said has been interesting. But sorry, but even more interesting than everything else was that about football resetting. I think that was the phrase you used, wasn't it, Carrie?
And then going to the new normal afterwards, yeah.
And I think that that's really interesting, that this resetting obviously could go one of two ways. It could carry on the hyper-capitalism of the pre-coronavirus era, or it could go to something that is more, is fairer, more equal, and, takes on board the spirit of like Colchester United, where they have this very good egalitarian culture. And there's been lots of examples of that. And in a way, it could be a wake-up call, because I think football was in danger of killing itself, actually. I mean, I think there's this sort of death spiral of an ever smaller number of clubs fighting it out. Football's all about competitiveness and about unpredictability, It's always been, famously, it's always been a game that anybody can play. That's the beauty of football.
I'll stop you there, Anthony. I've got a picture I want to put up at this point, if Kevin and Noah have got it handy. When you talk about a time gone when there was real competition in football, there was characters, because we lost one of your team's greats over the last few weeks, and two, in fact. I think, did I hear that Cherry died as well?
Yes, Trevor Cherry and Norman Hunter, yeah. But
if you could just put up a picture of Norman Hunter, Kevin, from the slides. And Anthony, could you talk through, because I know you're a bit of a historian of Leeds United, talk through what it means for fans at a team like Leeds United when somebody like Norman Hunter passes away because of the COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, I mean, Norman Hunter, and actually, ironically, Peter Bonetti as well.
Yeah, the
cat, which kind of, so people don't think I'm just going off too much on a Leeds thing. I mean, the Leeds-Chelsea thing, Peter Bonetti, there's Norman Hunter, who, for example, played in that famous 1970 FA Cup final against Chelsea, which, it's 50 years since that happened, and Peter Bonetti, the cat, was in goal. Both great footballers, both sadly died as a result of the virus. Norman Hunter epitomised an era in which loyalty and commitment and putting your club before everything was paramount. I mean, it wasn't Norman Hunter, it was his teammate Billy Bremner who said the famous quote, "Side before self every time," and that is the mantra of that era as far as the Leeds players were concerned. Not just Leeds, of course, the great teams like Liverpool of that era as well, Chelsea. And what happened is that I think when Norman sadly passed, the Leeds fans were suddenly, even those far too young to remember Norman Hunter were very moved by this person who he's not from Leeds, but he stayed on at Leeds, and he's sort of seen at every single match. And I met him, quite a lot over the years. He's even now a Norman Hunter suite, which I remember I went to recently. And he is, it sounds like a cliche, but he was Leeds through and through. And he brought back an era when all the footballers were connected to the fans. So I used to go and watch Leeds train every week, and as a school kid, and the footballers were there. So, the great Leeds players like Billy Bremner, John Giles, Norman Hunter, and, I could go through the whole team if you want me to, but, okay.
I know you can, Anthony. I know you can. For the benefit of the watchers, I can assure you he can, but he's not going to tonight. Carry on.
I'm not going to say Sprake, Reaney, Cooper, Bremner, Charlton, Hunter, Lorimer, Clark, Jones, Giles, Gray. I won't do that. But the fact is that they live near you. I mean, they live near people. That you saw them on the bus. You met them. They were on the whole, very friendly, very approachable. They didn't live in these remote. These are the elite players, of course. They were the of their day. They were the Messis and the Rooneys of their day. But they didn't live remote lives away from the fans. Norman Hunter was that kind of person. He came from a very strong northern working class background. He connected very strongly with a very northern working class team. He became a hero for qualities that weren't necessarily to do with technical ability.
We've got to remember that his nickname, I think it first came out on a banner at an FA Cup final, didn't it? It was Bite Your Legs. And as well as him being an excellent player, and as you've told me many times, a player's player of the year on occasion, he was also inclined for, he's also famous for one of the most spectacular pitch punch-ups with Franny Lee in the history of football.
Yes, and of course, they don't do that anymore, do they? Which I'm not saying we should hark back to the era where people used to have these punch-ups on the pitch. I'm not saying that. It was good entertainment. Don't get me wrong. And there's a lot wrong actually with the era that Norman Hunter came out of in terms of the hooliganism of the era, racism, sexism. There was a lot of homophobia. It was a lot of terrible things to do with football. But one thing that was good about it was the idea that you put the team, you put the community, the club you represent before everything, and there was no sense of anyone being a sort of fancy Dan or a big time Charlie at a club like Leeds, even though they were for 10 years more or less the best team in England, possibly Europe. They just didn't have this ethos where anyone was a prima donna, and they felt a social responsibility to their community.
Thanks, Anthony. Anthony can wax lyrical about the Leeds United. His first book, I think it was The Promised Land, The Reinvention of Leeds United, by Anthony Clavane. I strongly recommend that. And I recommend that book heartily as someone who was a Manchester United fan in the 1970s. And to be quite honest, I had a deep-seated loathing of Leeds United. But Anthony's book, I think, captures that period absolutely fantastically. And I recommend it. Carrie, if I could come back to you, I'm thinking of the women's game. It felt, and when we spoke during the competition last year, when you came to the great event at the New Inn, the great night we had when the Lionesses were triumphant, it felt, and we were talking about, was the World Cup, was international football going to trigger a new step forward for the women's game? But now there's the setback of the season coming to the end. But I wonder what impact the international competitions that have been postponed and abandoned is going to have. I'm thinking about the Olympics and Euro 21 under threat. Because in the women's game, international football seems to be very important from what I can see.
Yeah, the international game is much more important in the women's game than it is in the men's game now. And the Olympics, as you mentioned, so it's not an age group competition in the women's game. It's a senior competition. It's pretty much up there with winning a World Cup if you won the Olympics. So, yeah, the fact that your international competitions have been postponed or kicked down the road by at least 12 months, it's going to have a massive effect. So those of you who've been following women's football for a couple of years might remember that initially the WSL in England ran as a summer season, and then it would take a 6-week break in the summer for whichever international tournament was happening, because part of the reason that WSL was set up was to help the national team to have the senior players in the country fit, playing a competitive league. So the fact that we have no season finishing, the fact that now the preparation schedule for the Lionesses is now delayed by 12 months. We've already seen that the coach won't be staying on, and we have question marks about whether he's going to be there for the Olympics and whether they're going to have a new appointment in place to lead the Team GB during the Olympics. Yeah, I think everything is really up in the air, and I think that is going to have to be dealt with actually quite quickly. Obviously, the priority has to be, again, reiterate health and safety and make sure everyone get back to competition and training as safely as possible. But yes, there are going to be some serious questions having to be asked about the England schedule for the women's preparation, and also how the WSL calendar can help that, because getting just back to competition in August and playing through till May might not be enough.
Yeah, it's a real problem, isn't it? It's a real disappointment, because I think a lot of people, I've always watched women's football a little bit, but the World Cup really captured my imagination. I think we'll return to some of these themes in the second half, and it's such a pity if that momentum is going to slow a little. I'm sure women's football will continue to move forward, but it's a real pity to see a setback. We've had our pessimism about whether the season will finish, but I think we have one more poll, Kevin, about whether we thought the season might finish. So, having heard the debate, if we could just put up the poll about whether we think we're going to see any more football, Kevin. Just waiting for it to come out. I'm just interested to see whether you think it will happen. We thought about whether we'd like it to happen, but are you a bunch of doom and gloom merchants like Anthony and Carrie and myself? Do you think the football season will finish for your club? Voting yes or no this time. So if 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, put up the votes, Kevin. Oh, there's a bit more optimism out there. And maybe that's the odd Premier League fan, but there's 29% sort of said that they think that they might see some more football this year. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a very brief break. I suggest we just give you 2 or 3 minutes so you can nip to the loo if you need to. But the most important thing I want you to do is in the chat, there is the Just Giving link where you can go to Tom's wonderful fund, the Colchester United Football in the Community Coronavirus Just Giving campaign. Support that fantastic work he's doing with the food banks. There's families with free school meals where their children rely on those meals that are only getting them because of organisations like the Munch Club that Tom and his colleagues are supporting. So please, 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 whilst we have a 2 or 3 minute break, can you click on that link? We've seen John Burns has just, I saw he put in the chat what a fantastic job Tom and his team's doing. We need to support him. So please, 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 while we have a break, and we'll be back. It's 1:45 now. If we aim to be back just before 10:02 to continue with the second half. The other way, if the link's not working for you, or you prefer to do it on a different device to the one you're watching the event on, you can go to your other laptop, your tablet, your phone, and if you Google CUFITC, as in Colchester United Football in the Community, that's CUFITC, Coronavirus Just Giving, press search, and at the top of the list, you'll get Tom's Just Giving link. Go in there and give us your money, as Bob Geldof would say. And finally, we're going to try and attempt a bit of a technical whiz at the end of the show, we're going to try and get you in what's called in the Zoom world gallery view. And Carrie has pre-recorded a wonderful song for us. No, it is good, Carrie. It's good. We're all impressed. And we're going to do the scarf waving as if we're the end of at the end of one of those football matches in the 1970s on the terraces where we all used to hold our scarves up. So during the break, get yourself a drink, give us your money, and find your football scarf, and we'll be back just before 10 to. See you in a while. The people that don't know, the stand, I should imagine most of the people listening do, the stand behind me is the Colchester United South stand, where the loudest and most enthusiastic fans, and I should imagine quite a few of the people that are listening and watching us go. The highlights of the first half was not only giving the to the Just Giving campaign. We saw a dog enter Carrie Dunn's frame and lick her face. You don't usually see that on live TV.
You do not. I'm so sorry. She's normally very good, but she missed me. She was in the back room with my partner and she wanted mummy. I'm so sorry.
And Mike Harwood hasn't even appeared on the main screen yet to present one of his poems. But Donna from Norwich is saying, "Hi, Mike, you're looking good tonight." Not quite sure what to make of that. John Burns of Colchester United. You can speak later, Mike. Just bask in your glory. Tom and his team at this is from John Burns at Colchester United Supporters Association. I know a great stalwart amongst Colchester United fans says Tom and his team were doing an amazing job in and around Colchester even before the crisis, and have only enhanced that perception since when, with all the caring and helpful work they've undertaken. I think that really does ring true from what we've heard tonight. And Jane Connor, a Spurs fan, said interestingly when we were having the vote, she said that her view as a Premier League fan was that the Premier League shouldn't be finished if the Football League wasn't going to be finished. It should be voided and maybe all the leagues should come back in the autumn. Dave thought, and I think a lot of people weren't sympathetic towards Liverpool before until quite recently. But I think the Liverpool fans with their food collections for the Foodbank alongside the Everton fans, the fantastic campaign to get justice over Middlesbrough, and now Klopp. And Dave's described him as a wonderful human being as well as a good manager. I don't know if you're a Liverpool fan, but you're obviously quite taken by him. So Anthony has now returned, and we're now going to hear from our two authors tonight talking about their rather splendid books. We're going to start off with a reading from both of them, but just let me say a little bit about the books that our authors have written. Anthony has written what his publishers called, I can't remember the phrase, is it a triptych, Anthony? What was
triptych, but let's call it a trilogy.
Well, I've always quite liked triptych. He started off with A Promised Land, the reinvention of Leeds United, that David Peace, who wrote the fantastic book, The Damned United, that the film was based on, described as an absorbing, compelling and very personal history of Leeds. Brilliant. And as I've said before, if you can make the history of Leeds in the 1970s a compelling and beautiful book, you're one hell of an author. His second book was Does Your Rabbi Know You're Here?, which was the chant that Tottenham fans used to hear as they emerged from the tube. In what period was that, Anthony? Would that have been the 70s or earlier 60s?
Yeah, 70s, yeah.
So Does Your Rabbi Know You're Here? The story of English football's forgotten tribe, which of course was about the Jewish community. And most recently, he's got Moving the Goalposts, a Yorkshire tragedy that has the iconic picture of from the Kes film doing the two fingers on the front page. David Conn described it as a well-researched, lovingly written, thoughtful journey across the sporting highs and struggles of the English region. And we're going to hear a quote from that in a moment. Carrie's written two of what I would describe as the best books on women's football. And her latest one, which we're going to hear a short reading from in a moment, is The Pride of the Lionesses, The Changing Face of the Women's Football in England by Carrie Dunn. And it's been shortlisted for the Football Book of the Year. And Carrie, I understand that's like everything else football, that's come grinding to a halt. So we don't know whether glory is in your hands or not yet.
Yeah, I found out that I was longlisted on the day that we all went into lockdown. So there's going to be a launch party that night, which never happened. So the shortlisting hasn't happened either. So, yeah, but it's very exciting to be longlisted, so that's good.
But I'd recommend the book, which we're going to hear a reading from in just a moment. It's not only a book about the England and the fantastic Lionesses campaign, but across her two books, there's some fantastic insights into the history of women's football, the fantastic role that trailblazers like the Doncaster Bells played. It's a really good read. And to give us a flavour, Carrie, after that rather extravagant build-up, I thought we could set the scene for this discussion about the changing face of football by yourself first, Carrie, and then Anthony. I've asked you both to choose a passage which you think captures this theme of the changing face of football. Would you like to go first, Carrie?
Of course. It is a bitter irony that at a time when access to the male England players has been increased, with every single squad member taking part in roundtable conversations during their World Cup Media Day in the summer of 2018, roundly hailed as a breakthrough initiative, allowing them to be seen as real people and not just athletes, access to the women has decreased. One or two are selected for media duties and presented at an agreed time at an agreed venue. Easily set up phone interviews with the Lionesses are very nearly a thing of the past. This was also the case in France last summer. Long-serving women's football journalists, serving their dedicated niche market, were prevented from gaining the access they wanted, quite often sidelined in favour of the big-name male journalists who had taken a break from covering the men's game for this tournament. Of course, this is only at the very top level. The young pros at teams in the lower half of the WSL are still happy to chat, hardly believing their luck that people are interested in them. The semi-pros of the championship are difficult to get hold of because they spend all their time either at work or at training, but they too will talk. But if the long-term plan is indeed to make the women's game more like the men's, more clubs will turn professional and more staff will step in to buffer players from fans and journalists. Having said that, at important amateur fixtures with strong FA involvement, hosted at big grounds, the lack of attention to detail remains palpable. A request for the press box when I was writing this book was met with a blank stare and the response, "We don't have a press box," and a jokey question of whether I had meant to go to the nearby men's Premier League fixture. I knew perfectly well that this ground had a press box, by the way. I had reported from there previously. Ironically, it had also hosted several Lionesses fixtures in the past. Will more teams turn professional soon? Perhaps, if there is a huge cash injection available from somewhere, probably a men's club. Will they be professional in the sense that most fans would understand it, training twice a day, with a salary that is enough to live on and enough to pay the rent or mortgage? And will they stay professional? Is it a long-term plan? Is it sustainable? Is the money there and guaranteed for the next few seasons? The restructure of women's football in England was always intended to encourage greater competition on the pitch. The first years of the closed WSL was intended to share out talent and money and allow the professional women's game to put down roots. The quick expansion has meant that the talent pipeline has not yet developed, so overseas players have been drafted into top squads to strengthen the team. The clubs with the most money have attracted the biggest stars. It was also notable that as soon as Manchester United and Tottenham Hotspur secured promotion from the Championship, they announced new signings, established senior internationals, with the players who have got them to the WSL not offered a contract. That may have been the choice of the players, of course, or it may have been indicative that in a relatively small league, no chances can be taken on those unproven at that level. Maintaining a place in the top tier is essential. As I found while writing this book, in a time where professionalisation is still relatively new, England has a generation of players with the footballing ability to play in the top 2 tiers, but who have made the choice not to. For some, playing professionally is a dream, and they took the first opportunity that they were offered. For some, they are still waiting for that chance and are poised to write their resignation to that letter to their employer as soon as they can. For others, it can never be an option. Perhaps they're already in their mid-30s and know they only have a few years of playing left. Perhaps they have a well-paying vocation that will be their life's work after they've hung up their boots. Perhaps they have a mortgage that requires a bigger salary than is offered in English professional football at the moment. Whatever their reasons, this drain away from the top 2 leagues means that the strength and depth is simply not there at the moment. The day after England's semi-final loss to the USA, Southampton Saints announced they would be closing down with immediate effect. They put it down to decreasing player numbers and lack of financial support. Southampton Saints had a glorious history, beginning their life as Red Star Southampton and gracing the top flight of the National Division as well as an FA Cup final. The men's club adopted them officially in 2001. The women's team's funding ended when the men were relegated from the Premier League. When the men were promoted again, they later began their own women's side. Saints also had a couple of legends as managers. Vanessa Rainbird, who had run the team until the men's club had folded them in, and Sue Lopez, one of the players who had kept the game going in England during the FA ban, and who had even spent some of her playing career in Italy when such a thing was rarely thought of. It was an odd coincidence for me. My social media memories reminded me of a conversation I'd had with a Southampton-born friend of mine a few years previously. He wanted to know why his club didn't have a women's team. Of course, they did. They were just not in the WSL, so he didn't know anything about them. I told him all about Red Star and their Saints, as well as Lopez and Rainbird and all their achievements. He'd never heard about any of it before. As for how women's football in England is perceived from the outside, this is still in flux. At the Isthmian Cup final last season, one Ashford fan grew increasingly frustrated with the team, apparently ignoring the fact that these were amateurs playing against other amateurs ranked 2 divisions higher, and shouted obscenities at them throughout, supposedly in an effort to encourage them. Heads turned at every single one of his utterances, but nobody felt confident enough to challenge him. Perhaps unsurprisingly, such a degree of anger in such a small ground. Afterwards, I wondered whether he was actually the father of one of the players, and that made me sadder than if he'd been a random spectator. Perhaps women's football is now taken seriously to such a degree that these aggressive parents with ludicrously unfair high expectations have infiltrated it, just as they did in junior boys football. On the same night as Orient lifted that cup, Manchester United secured promotion from the FA Women's Championship. The fully professional team in a semi-pro league was always likely to grab one of the slots to go up. But the main Manchester United Twitter account failed to acknowledge it even happening on the night. The men didn't have a match. It wouldn't have been a stretch to create a graphic ready to use on social media. For a club that boasts a lot about its new commitment to women's football, it seemed to be rather telling that they made no mention of it until 13 hours afterwards. If the FA's recommended pathway for women's clubs is for them to be fully integrated into men's clubs, then men's clubs need to do much more and stop treating the women's game as an afterthought, there as a desperate effort to indicate belief in equality of opportunity. Thank you. You're on mute, Bryn.
That was a bit embarrassing. I think that the interesting thing is that the women's football is not at the beginning, but it's certainly on the rise. Whereas I think Anthony's themes in his book is very much looking back at what's happened to the men's game. So I'd like to invite Anthony now to read a passage from his book, and then let's try and draw some of the common threads out and have a discussion about it, and see if you can be more expert with your mic as you start your contribution, Anthony.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you. This is a little bit from the chapter about when Hull City went into the Premier League. Their owner was AC Milan, and this is about his attempt to change the name of Hull City to Hull Tigers. I'll just read a very short extract and then a very short extract from the conclusion to put it in a broader context. Alam has spent more than £70 million of his own money on the club, and yet he has turned out to be the most divisive owner in the club's history. 3 months after Hull City reached the FA Cup final, losing to Arsenal, with the fans still basking in the afterglow of that occasion, he announced that Hull City would be renamed Hull Tigers. In order to compete in a Premier League now dominated by mega wealth and not get left behind by an increasingly internationalised and monetised elite, the Tigers, as he called them, had no choice but to go global. In the top flight, where there were significant differences in wage bills, transfer kitties and revenue collection, a plucky underdog no longer had a chance. Hull City is irrelevant, he said to the local paper. It's a common name. I want the club to be special. City, the name, is a lousy identity. Replacing City with Tigers, he argued, would transform Tiny Hull into Mighty Hull. It would boost their international marketing appeal and reach out to an international TV audience. In the Premier League, you are a global club, he explained. You should act big, global. If you want to act as local, then remain local. But I didn't buy the club to remain local. A campaign group called City Till We Die was immediately formed to fight the proposal, and a new Battle of Hull commenced. History, tradition and community play a vital part in why supporters are loyal to football clubs, one protester explained. Football clubs are not brands. The protesters were depicted as unreconstructed Luddites who lived in a time warp. They were standing in the way of the club's long overdue migration into media and entertainment land. They were traditionalist dinosaurs who would rather visit spit and sawdust grounds in the league's nether regions than glamorous stadiums like Old Trafford, Anfield and the Emirates. Some of this was true. Some campaigners liked playing up to the stereotype, reminiscing about the bits of rust that used to shower down on them from the Boothbury Park roof. To be honest, I'd rather see Hull City in the 4th Division playing Macclesfield and Stockport than playing Manchester City as Hull Tigers, admitted David Goldman, one of the fans who protested against the name change. Another fan, Dave Windass, said, "My dad invested so much time and money on City, not as an owner, of course, but as a fan. He went for decades. Clubs like Hull, they're the product of the city. The owners are the custodians of the club's history and heritage. My old man died before going to the new stadium, before the FA Cup final. Whenever I go to the football, I always feel my old man's with me. It's sentimental, I know, but the name City was important to him. City is what we call Hull. We've called them City for 100 years. It's a lot deeper than a name change. It crystallises what we're about. It epitomises what Yorkshire is, or at least should be, as a county." And just very quickly to put that in a context of something happening not just in Hull but nationally, I just wanted to say that with the exception of Hull and Huddersfield Town, the top flight has in recent years become a Yorkshire free zone. So you get occasionally a small club doing well. Leicester City is often cited, but the romantic ascent of Leicester, by the way owned by a billionaire Thai businessman and one of the top 30 richest clubs in the world, doesn't alter the game's long-term transformation from a paternalistic, relatively egalitarian sport to a global entertainment industry dominated by rapacious mega brands. The chances of a Hull, Sheffield United, Bradford City or Barnsley, this was written of course before Sheffield United got into the Premier League, anyway, the chance of them getting into the top tier are even more remote. Their fans were once the heart and soul of football. Many of the country's clubs are no longer the heartbeat of their communities. Their players, an ever-decreasing number of whom are recruited locally, exist in a completely different financial orbit. The communal to and fro of the old standing terraces belongs to a disappearing world of well-paid skilled jobs, crowded pubs and terrace streets. The evisceration in the 1980s of that world sounded the death knell for a simpler, purer, harder, edgier, yes, and at times uglier version of football.
Thank you, Anthony. I think that it's quite interesting that there are some sort of common themes about the role of the economy and the role of money and the transformation of both the women's game and the men's game. So I'd just like to sort of explore some of those differences. Carrie, bringing you in first, how do you think the culture of women's football seemed quite different, but you recounted in your passage the abusive fan. Are we going to see the women's game change as it becomes professionalised? And I've often wondered whether the Premier League's interest in the women's game now is both a blessing and a curse, in that it's a blessing, obviously it comes with money, but it also comes with some of the problems that Anthony's just described that have existed in the injustices that exist between clubs in the men's game. What's your thinking about the Premier League's hand beginning to become involved in women's football?
Yeah, I think it's kind of inevitable now, because that has been the recommendation, it's been the policy. The Premier League clubs are expected to have a women's team, and they're expected to be supporting them financially. As I've said in that passage, this has been the case for decades now. Men's Club has taken on a women's team. I thought it was a great outreach program. I think it's a great way to promote, to attract women to their games as well. But it's been the women's team that get cut loose every time the men's team finds themselves in financial difficulties. It happened to Charlton, kind of mid 2000s. It happened to Fulham, who were the first professional women's team in England, and they just got cut loose after about 18 months. And then we saw it a couple of years ago when Notts County were taken over by a new owner, and he decided that he couldn't keep the women's team going, and they were just closed down, but just before the spring series started. So yeah, I think it is a blessing and a curse, and something that women's teams need to be very wary of. It's not just an unmitigated good thing.
I wonder if it's worth repeating the story, Carrie, that you told when we had the Arts Centre event about what happened to the Doncaster Bells when the league became more professionalised. Yeah,
so the way that the WSL and the Championship operate is that clubs apply for a licence to compete in the leagues for 4 years at the moment. And so the clubs have to fill in this long application form, and they have to talk about their financial backing, have to talk about their marketing plans, they have to say how they can guarantee a home ground, etc., etc., etc. So basically they have to be giving all these assurances to the powers that be that they're going to be sustainable for the next few years if they get a licence to compete in this league. And Doncaster Bells had just secured promotion to the WSL. They filled an application for a WSL licence, and they didn't get it. They found themselves playing in the third tier instead into the National League, and just been relegated again. But I do follow them in the latest book, In the Pride of the Lionesses, and it was interesting to go up there and talk to them about how things have changed for them over their 50 years of existence. So Doncaster Bells have been around since the late 60s, set up by a group of women who wanted to have a kickabout. And they've always been a women-run club. They've always been promoting female coaches. So they've got a really strong talent pipeline in terms of female coaches, which I think is very different and very important actually at the moment. But they seem to be fairly adamant that they are going to be an amateur team on the pitch, certainly for the foreseeable future. And that's a choice, and I think that's absolutely fine. And I was going to mention Lewis in the Championship of women's football. They're a community-run club. They are managing to run without the financial support of a big team, and they're doing very, very well. They have
Lewis that's got equal pay, isn't it?
Yes, that's what I was just saying.
Oh, sorry, I'm cut into each other.
Yeah. They have equal pay for their men's teams and for the women's teams, and they've talked a lot about their ethos of running this club on equal gender equality guidelines. So, there are signs that things in women's football can be done differently. Certainly at the moment, whether that will change should Lewes get promoted to the WSL, or if the FA want to bring in fully professional teams in the Championship as well, rather than semi-pro. We'll have to wait and see.
One of the things that you've written about, I think you wrote about before you wrote your 2 books about the Lionesses, was fan culture, women's fan culture, Carrie. And listening to what Anthony said about the real community identity that Hull City had with their name and refusing to be renamed and become the Tigers, I just wonder if you'd like to draw any threads out about what you think characterises some of the cultural differences between fans in the women's game and the men's game. Has that developed differently? What have you observed?
Yeah, so my research on fan culture in the women's game has been more at international level, as we talked about. It's a more important aspect of the women's game than it is in the men's game. But what I did find that was interesting is it's not just about nationality or locality or community by picking a team when you're picking a women's team. It can be about picking a favourite player quite often whose career you then follow. So female players tend to move around a lot because leagues have historically folded because of lack of financial support, etc. So people pick a player to follow. But also quite interestingly, women who don't watch men's football will watch women's football as a kind of, gender solidarity thing. And also you get a great deal of LGBTQ fans supporting women's football because of the number of out gay, bisexual players in women's football as well. And they think that it's kind of a political decision almost. So it's not necessarily rooted in the same traditions as men's football fandom, but certainly there are some trends you can pick out.
So I wonder, Anthony, if you could turn to a theme that we've spoken often about, which is this, in the lower leagues, the idea that of being against modern football, associated with a lot of the Phoenix clubs that have gone bankrupt, that have tried to re-establish themselves through fan-owned clubs. How do you think that's affecting the culture of modern football?
The effect of fans having more say and trying to get more control is having a good effect on football. I want us to continue along that route. That whether it's the women's game, the men's game, the grassroots is the most important thing, and football's always been about its fans. And if we can progress maybe along the lines of the German model. I mean, that would be my. You
want to say a little bit more about what?
Yeah, I mean, in Germany, you've got a situation where fans run the clubs, or rather, they have 50% of the shares of the club, and therefore you stop having an owner coming in who's a billionaire, financial capitalist, or a sheikh, or something like that, and you've got it's called a 50+1 rule, and that's why I think in Germany they have a more egalitarian system, and it's a lot fairer than in this country. But I think we're a long way away from that. It would be great to move towards that. But what's been wonderful in the last 10 years, the Hull City example is one small example. There have been these small victories by fans. So Hull City was successful in stopping their name being changed, and you can go and pick out these small victories. And you've got, I know, a number of examples, Bryn, haven't you? You know probably more than me.
So there's the Blackpool example where they got rid of their owner. Long campaign, fantastic, amazing boycott campaign, and then at Leyton Orient, the Colchester fans experienced the sight of the Orient fans invading the pitch in protest against their owner. It was a fantastic day, that, because the Colchester fans were hoping to get into the playoffs, and with a short period to go, the Leyton Orient fans invaded the pitch, and one would have thought that there would have been a really negative response at that point. But there wasn't. The Colchester fans started applauding the Leyton Orient fans, and the Leyton Orient fans responded by coming towards the Colchester United fans to applaud them. So I wonder, Anthony, how do you feel? I assume that you're absolutely desperate for Leeds to get promoted. if the season ever starts again and Mr. Belisha gets to sit on his bucket. But do you feel that there might be a cost to what Leeds is about as a club if you get into the Murdoch, Sky-dominated Premier League?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that I think there are two answers to that very quickly. One answer is I do feel conflicted about it because I think that for all the reasons that we've been talking about, the way that English football has developed into this, concentration of money, bringing about, concentration of quality, and therefore a small number of clubs dominating is a bad thing. It's based on greed. And that's definitely been financed by the Murdoch Sky deal, TV deals, and other TV deals. On the other hand, I do feel that a city like Leeds, which is there's no divine right to be in the Premier League, but when you get someone like Bielsa coming along, of course, we should mention that they did lose to Colchester United. I think, Tom, I'm sorry, I haven't mentioned that so far, in 1971.
Could I just display Ray Harford's signature on my retro shirt, the man that scored one of the goals on that very day, as you brought up the subject, Anthony?
Yeah, and so, when they were, that to me is a great example. When Leeds were the Manchester City or Chelsea or Manchester United of their day, they lost to 4th Division Colchester United in a fair fight. It was at Layer Road. It was 3-2 to Colchester. And I think that, therefore, on the one hand, I want Leeds to get back in the Premier League, but I think that they'll be joining an exclusive club that is becoming more powerful and richer at the cost of a lot of the less well-off clubs. On the other hand, can I just say one thing? This might not be a popular point of view. I think the ethos which comes out of Leeds, which is that, we're not going to compromise, we're going to do it on our terms, and we'll live or die by that, is a kind of ethos that would be good for the Premier League because, a team like Leeds, when they go, they go like a train. When they go up, they don't just go up and settle for avoiding relegation. They go for glory, and often very often it will result in a disaster, and they'll slide all the way down again. But I think that's good for football, and Bielsa is good for football because he is a manager who believes in fairness and decency and playing the game the right way. So
I'd like to bring Carrie in. I'm conscious that we're coming towards the end of the show, and I'd just like to put up what I thought was an iconic picture of women's football in the World Cup. The Rapinoe picture, Kevin, if we could just get that up on the screen. And I'd just like Carrie to talk to us about what Megan Rapinoe represents in modern football today, because I thought her performance, not just on the field that was absolutely magnificent last summer, but off the field was a revelation in terms of football culture. So what do you make of Megan Rapinoe?
Yeah, you mentioned her performances last summer. Yes, she was very good, and she won all the awards at the end of the year. But I was actually talking to my colleagues at Eurosport about this a couple of weeks ago.
There's that fantastic picture.
What a fantastic picture! I don't think she was even the best player in that USA team. What she was the most influential. She's been the leader. She's been the vice captain. She's obviously wearing the armband there. She's been the vice captain of that squad for a long time. She's been very happily vocal on a lot of issues. It kind of goes a little bit back, I guess, to what we were saying about Sergio Aguero earlier. It's so rare to hear footballers say anything that it's absolutely refreshing when footballers do take a stance and make their beliefs known. So she's talked about racism, talked about sexism and homophobia. She's been one of the leading figures in the US women's national team's equal pay fight. And I think the fact that she's this instantly recognisable, iconic figure now, even to people who don't necessarily watch women's football, you would still probably recognise Rapinoe. I think that's absolutely crucial.
Fantastic, amazing cultural difference when Rapinoe made her speech when they went to celebrate. I think it was in New York, wasn't it? And she celebrated the fact that there was women of different sexualities in the team. Can you imagine that happening in the Premier League?
No, yeah, you can't at the moment, can you, at all? But again, it goes back to what I was saying. Women's football does have this long history of being welcoming to women of all sexualities, of all points along the gender spectrum, not just in the professional game, but also all the way down to grassroots. And it's something that I follow in the Pride of the Lionesses. And yeah, the fact that she talks publicly about this, I think it actually makes the cultural difference between women's football and men's football very stark in some ways. And that kind of ethos of welcoming and inclusivity and being able to express an opinion is something that you very, very rarely get at the top of a professional game.
Thanks, Carrie. I think if I could urge people to take the opportunity to read these books, because the kind of football, I'm a bit obsessive when it comes to reading football books. I was thinking of doing my top 10 to go on Twitter in the next few weeks when I get bored during the lockdown. But I think what I like in a football book is something that's not just about what happened at particular matches and recounting what happened and who scored. It's the football books that look at football's place in culture, looks at what happens on the pitch, yes, but what happens in terms of the fans, the community, how it fits into the economy, what the politics of the game is. And I think in Carrie's and Anthony's books, and both of them, and all three of them in the case of Anthony, we've got excellent examples of sports books, and I can't recommend them highly enough. Now, Mike, if you could start to unmute yourself, the big moment, and whether you can come close to Mr. Roberts' virtuoso performance of the rapping Bob Dylan related poetry. And by the way, Anthony, just before I bring Mike in, I've had requests coming across the screen on the chat. Could you do that one as one of the Art Centre poems as part of your series? That the watchers think you should.
Yeah, I picked that up. That was Donna, wasn't it? Thank you very much, Donna, in Norwich. We'd be delighted to put that onto the podcast for the Art Centre. I do a daily poem every day, and we've covered lots of different poets. It's been really fun to do a football poem, and I've enjoyed the...
And if you look out for it on the Art Centre, you'll not only get to see Anthony's bookshelf, you'll get to see his garden, I believe.
That's right. Also, on that series, I did a Mike Harwood poem. I'm not a poet, so let's be clear. I just read other people's stuff. Mike Harwood's the guy that we're looking forward to now. He's the creative guy, and this is a Colchester legend. You're going to hear now.
Specially commissioned, the man from Colne Radio, the Colne Radio poet in residence. I give you Mr. Mike Harwood.
Thank you, and no pressure at all. Just I've been working on this all week, actually, but it's for a good cause, I think, and given the assembled company and the listeners. And the poem is called The Beautiful Game and the Impact of No Football on Fans and Clubs. And the last time football was cancelled was in 1939. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, only 3 matches were played. And football fans clearly are highly diverse in their character, relationship with the game. So my poem is a projection of how some fans might fill their Saturdays without the great game. As we were talking about earlier, discussed, a lot of clubs like Colchester United have, I'm not reading from notes, by the way, I'm just looking over there. It's a joke, by the way. Thank you. As discussed earlier, clubs like Colchester United have responded very positively to community needs and helping during the crisis. The Premiership clubs with more money have also been making substantial contributions. And towards the end of the poem, I raised questions about will their community spirit continue when the football leagues resume? They may, of course, bring in the question of money and difference between the leagues. A beautiful game and the impact of no football on fans. The worst crisis for the football fan since '39. No turnstiles click since the COVID swine. No chat on the train with an away team supporter. No which of your best players should we look out for. The long arm of the pre-match pub buzz not extended. No convivial 3 pints when one was intended. The long day of Saturday looms with no goalmouth action. No half-time chicken balti, pucker pie satisfaction. Put that line in there for you, Bryn. The long day of Saturday looms with no goalmouth action. No half-time chicken balti, pucker pie satisfaction. The 3 o'clock kickoff replaced by footy mates Zoom, with their team's old matches lap-topped in the spare rooms. Just like at live matches, they ridicule and moan. Heightened emotions ring through tablets, smartphones. What a brat! 3 years out! How could he miss that? Useless or what? Take him off, effing Pratt. The tier of away fans chant crowded derision. Who are ya? Who are ya? Who are ya? The away team is denied a penalty shout. And number 9 is a canny contriver. Just like this poetry, searching for a rhymer. Who does he think he is? Tom Daly the diver? The mates team on a quick breakaway, a goal no doubts. Just as Zoom's 40 minutes time limit runs out. Half-time disappointment filters through smartphone tears. We bloody missed our captain's first goal in years. The final whistle marks a wearisome win as a bombing away supporter hacks his way in. We was robbed, you lucky effers. You were clueless. You only beat us 1-0 because we was useless. No Saturday football, no 5 o'clock final score. A frustrated fan drills a hole in the wall. In a passion of untamed and energised do-it-yourself, the big gash he makes won't hold up the shelf. Match of the day is not the real McCoy, subbed by the infantile Mrs. Brown's boys. The following week's programme is at least a puzzle. Shearer and Whitey rate pitch fighting struggles. Bauer and Dyer, player mates from Newcastle, sent off for punching each other up. Suarez bites Cellini's shoulder. Beyond belief. His excuse? I lost my balance and fell on my teeth. In first place for his launch on a fan who called him French Dick, Eric Cantona, for his terrific kung fu high kick. There's no one-size-fits-all answer to how fans will chime with long-term cancellations in pandemic times. When this is over and the beautiful game rises, we'll need less division, not huge transfer prizes. Big clubs will have to share football's wealthy gains. Support lower league clubs to stay in the frames. When it's all over and the beautiful game rises, key workers must be able to afford ticket prices. The Football League slogan is, "We are one team." We need that now for the football dream. Premiership clubs in the promotion of unity must show what they mean by the spirit of football in the community. Thank you.
Whoa!
Excellent, Mike. Really enjoyed that. That's absolutely fantastic. And I think you sort of captured our sort of disappointment and not witnessing all those things and doing them and being there. And even, thank you for the sentence donated to me or dedicated to me, eating our pucker pies. Thank you.
Cut me a couple of shillings, actually, I'll say. Not buying you one at half time. That was all right.
I've just heard, Tom, that the Colchester United Supporters Association is pleased to donate £300 to your campaign. That's great news. That's just come through from John on the feed. That's really good. That's really good. Which gives me another cue. Go to the chat box, look at the link, click on Just Giving and give Tom Tayler and his fantastic team at Colchester United Football in the community the donations that they deserve. Now, we're going to attempt something from a musical dimension, and we're going to try and do something with a gallery view what we're going to be doing is for the people, the participants, unfortunately, the Facebook crew, as I might call them, that are watching on the link up elsewhere can't participate in this bit, but they might be able to witness the shambolic goings on which I think I'm about to unleash. I'm going to ask Kevin and Noah, our production team, to start to see if they can reveal all the people that are present and upgrade you to panelists. And I'm hoping that you followed my instructions to find your scarves so that when Carrie's song is played, which some of you might know, we can have a screen, a gallery screen full of people doing their flags as Carrie's song is played. So, Kevin, can you start to reveal our audience? This is not the time to get stage fright. This is the time to find your scarf.
We are revealing them.
Jane, hello.
Right.
You're muted though, Jane.
No longer.
So people are emerging. This is the people that have been watching. Well, one person's emerged. Carrie has pre-recorded her song. Welcome to Connie.
Can I go and get my Leeds United scarf? Have I got time?
If you're watching...
Give me 1 minute.
If you're going to appreciate... Yeah, get a move on, Anthony. If you're going to appreciate this gallery view, you need to go to the top right-hand corner and click to choose gallery rather than speaker view if you're going to see us in all our glory. Otherwise, you'll just see one person with their scarves. Oh, look, Rosa Clavane with her Leeds United scarf. Harry, who I believe is in university up north, Colchester United scarf, I hope. Yeah, good to see it. Good to see it. Connie, for the avoidance of doubt, is not wearing a Manchester United scarf. She is wearing my other scarf, my favourite non-league club, FC United of Manchester, not to be mistaken with the Premiership big boys. If you haven't got scarves, you can wave your arm. How are we doing, Kevin? Are we going to get some more people?
It's to click on their camera and make sure it's showing.
So if you are emerging, you could see your video screen, yeah? Steve, have you got a scarf? What on earth is that? Steve, unmute yourself and reveal your team.
Bryn, it's a Brentford scarf.
I remember. And I see that David, my reference earlier on in the poll to if you live in London, I mentioned his side rather than
broadcasting.
Yeah, rather than places like Tottenham and Arsenal. Right, how are we doing? Is there many more to come up?
You want us to start playing the music, playing it.
So, do you know what to do, everybody? Right.
Look.
Right, and this is Carrie. This really is Carrie. I kid you not. Was it with your karaoke machine, Carrie, that you pulled this together?
We need to share.
Carrie, can you take off mute to sort of?
I am. Yes, kind of. It's a backing track. My partner's a singer, and yes, I use his backing tracks.
So how are we doing, Kevin? Is this the most we're going to go? Is this?
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, then don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky.
Wave your arms. Girls in Oldham.
Walk on.
I'm hoping that's been committed to the video so we can share that shambolic performance. And the original song, when it was given to us by Carrie, before we murdered it by cutting it in and out with everybody singing with their microphones unmuted, was bordering on the tear-jerking, I thought, but it didn't quite come over in the sing-song. Anyway, we've come to the end of a great evening. You'll expect me now to say, go to that Just Giving link at the bottom if you haven't already in the chat box, and click on the Just Giving site and donate to Tom's fantastic campaign. And if you are watching on Facebook, you can still do it. Just go to Google, put in CUFITC, that's Colchester United Football in the Community, CUFITC, Coronavirus Just Giving, and it will appear at the top of the list and you will be able to make your donation. And so I'd like to thank everybody for tonight's Changing the Face of Football, a COVID crisis live football event. I hope it's helped you get through this starvation of football that we're all experiencing. I'd like to thank first and foremost, and definitely last and least, but first and foremost, our fantastic producers, Mr. Kevin Sheridan and Mr. Noah Jaffe. I'd like to thank Carrie Dunn and Anthony Clavane, who painted a picture of the changing face of football. I'd like to thank Tom Tayler and Callum, who helped put this link up with the Colchester United Football in the Community together. I'd like to thank our fantastic poets, Mike Harwood and Anthony Roberts, and I look forward to hearing some of those poems being repeated on the Colchester Arts Centre website. So it's special thanks to Colchester United to letting us stream this on Facebook tonight. So thank you to the U's, thank you to the Colchester United Football in the Community. A big shout out for John Waldron at the Gazette, who helped us publicise it, and for the Why Me charity that we've made a donation to, that's provided us with this fantastic Zoom webinar linkage today. So finally, have a great evening. And let's hope the doom and gloom that we all experienced about the football season not finishing doesn't prove to be true, and we all get to see Colchester United storm into the First Division, and for Anthony's sake, Felicia sitting on his bucket as his team soar into the Premier League. Thank you very much, and good night.